Good morning and welcome to Mental Health Matters with me, Dr Audrey Tang. My co-host is Judith Crosier, and this is the show where we deal with all things workplace well-being. Now, it is said that in midlife, your back goes out more than you do. And apart from being the butt of many jokes, what many people report is in midlife, we begin to feel invisible. And no more so in the area than in sexual well-being. And this is why we've got Professor Sharron Hinchliff joining us again. She is the founder of the Sexual Rights Charter, and she promotes the importance of sexual well-being throughout the lifespan. And this is something that we tend to neglect. So let's head over to the main studio. Good morning, Sharron. As always, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. It's really great to be here.
Well, we wanted to really kick off with your amazing work. I'll hand over to my colleague.
Absolutely. Good morning, Professor Sharron. Can you tell us about the Sexual Rights Charter, please, and what you hope it will achieve?
Yes, and thank you ever so much for inviting me on here to talk about the work that we're doing. So our Sexual Rights Charter is a tool, or more, should I say it's more of a resource that helps people to have conversations about sexuality. So, you know, it's based on evidence of need. So in our research, we've done quite a bit of research over the years where we've talked to people, members of the public, who've said they've found it a difficult conversation to have. You know, if they're experiencing a difficulty, they're not quite sure who to talk to or how to talk about it. And equally, we've spoken with professionals as well who work in the health field and the social care field, and some of whom have said similar things, that they really want to support their patients or service users in terms of sexuality issues, but they felt like they haven't had that kind of training, so they're not quite sure how to raise the topic or what to do with it if they ask about it, and then an issue is kind of broached by the patient.
Oh gosh,
It's a great idea.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, it is, and it's a really excellent resource, as you say, as are other charters. But how do you get organisations to sign up to it, such as GPs? And is there still some way to go to improve the advice given to older adults when it comes to sexual well-being?
Yes. So I'll answer that the other way around, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course.
So I think there's a long way to go. I feel like we're getting better in the topic around sexual activity and sexual expression in our older years is getting better, and there's more acceptance, there's more visibility, there's more recognition of that. But somehow it's still got that taboo element, and I think, you know, the sort of social attitudes can be really hard to shift, and because of that we've got this kind of layer of taboo that's still there, and that's one of the reasons why it can be a difficult topic to talk about. But, you know, I think it's not just around getting our primary care colleagues to sign up to the charter. It's about working in secondary care as well, because we do get a lot of people that might have health conditions or they're having treatments that can have an impact on their sexual well-being and their sexual expression. But again, we've got the professionals working in those services that find it quite hard to actually broach the topic or to know what advice to give. And equally across social care as well, adult social care, we find similar situations. So we're hoping that the charter will help people to do that kind of work in those different contexts. And one of the contexts, I guess, is the Age of Love Cafe that we've been talking about already, that you're hosting, I think, this weekend. Because it's okay for us to rely on professionals and staff to sort of build those skills and develop their expertise in this area. But we also need to empower people that are living in the community as well, so that if they feel like they want to have that conversation, then at least they've got a bit of knowledge and a bit of background. And they've got the language to use as well, because how do we talk about things that are sexually related, and what sort of words do we use, and how do we describe what's happening to us? You know, it's just made all the more difficult when it's a sensitive topic like it is, and when it's quite embarrassing. But I think, you know, if anyone wants to sign up to that, you know, feel free to just have a look at our website, and that's agesexandrights.com, and just start the conversation in that way, because that's one of the ways that we can help people get involved with the charter, or sign up for the charter if you like, or use the resources to help them in the work that they do, is just by maybe checking out that website to start with.
No, I think that's really good advice, because I think a lot of people even don't know that they don't have the language to talk about this sort of thing. And you almost get the situation where there's jokes and there's memes where if this was about men, if these issues were happening to men, there would be pills, there would be research, there'd be so much. Whereas women go to the doctor and just are told, oh, you've just got vaginal atrophy, which is a horrible phrase anyway.
It's awful.
Yeah, it is. It's a horrible phrase. And then we don't always have the words to sort of say, okay, but can I still have sex? Or why does sex? It becomes kind of embarrassing. So I guess, why is that language about sex, sexual intimacy and sexual well-being, or sex as being part of well-being, why is that so important that we keep using it and keep thinking about it as an important part of well-being as we get older, especially?
Yeah, I think one of the issues is that we tend to think about sexual activity and sexual health in relation to younger people, and it's easier to talk about in terms of younger people. And I think, from my perspective, it's because a lot of the messaging is around supporting the sexual health of young people, the sexually transmitted infections, and we know that younger people are more likely to get sexually transmitted infections. But the sort of conversation seems to be around, younger people's sexual and reproductive health. So we're only just starting to use those words in relation to older adults as a society anyway. I mean, in gerontology and in psychology and sociology, we've been using them for some years, but as a society we find it a little bit more tricky. But part of the work that we are doing is really to help normalise those conversations and just kind of, help people to sort of talk about and recognise that sexual expression is a normal part of the life course, across the board, in sort of our older years as well, and not to see it as something unusual or something a bit weird or something a bit icky or something that we don't do. And part of the I think the reason for that might have been those jokes you've just been talking about, Audrey, and those postcards and those birthday cards that really do mock the sexual expression of older adults.
Yeah, and that absolutely has to change. And what you're doing takes us a long way in at least addressing that there is a problem in talking about it in joke form. And I think what you're doing is brilliant. And what I love is you use the word sexual expression. And that's so nice, because when we're talking about sexual well-being, we're not just talking about penetrative sex. We are talking about sexual intimacy, expressing ourselves sexually in all different sorts of ways. And what issues do you find that people face when the only touch, for example, they receive is medical, is just their doctor kind of, and so if they are experiencing sort of that loneliness or that need for that contact, what can people do if they don't have a partner?
Yeah, that's such a good question, and it is something that I do come across quite a lot in the work that I do. I don't work in a therapeutic context because that's not my professionalism, but I do speak to a lot of people through my research projects and the outreach work that I do in community, and it does come up quite a lot, and people talking about missing that intimacy that you can get from physical touch. And I think that just is because touch is really, really powerful. We know that it conveys emotions. We know that it offers comfort. We know that it can have a less pleasant side to it as well. But thinking about the positives of touch, then it does release oxytocin, and that's what we call the love hormone. And apparently just 20 seconds of having that hug or that touching can do that. But the love hormone, that's responsible for our bonding and our trust and our empathy that we have with another individual. But the touch, the physical touch, and the hugging can also release endorphins as well. So the ones that are connected with the reward centre of our brain, and these are why we feel things like pleasure from having these activities. But I do recognise that we can't always get that touch with an individual partner or partners. So we can get that through non-sexual contact. And I know I've heard of care homes, for example, that have had trained staff that do hand massages for residents. Yeah, that are very, very well received, because that level of intimacy and touch, and it's not a sexual contact at all, but it is a very rewarding and comforting and pleasurable kind of experience.
And quite intimate as well, a hand massage.
It is intimate as well, but without being sexually
yes,
intimate.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
you get the best of both worlds.
That's right. And before I came on this morning, actually, I thought I'll have a look, and we can still get those endorphins being released if we're stroking or hugging one of our pets. So if you've got a cat or a dog, then you know that you can sort of get that level of that benefit from there.
Oh, definitely.
That's really important as well. Yeah, we both have dogs and pets, and we both know that.
And the pet benefits as well, which is really lovely. So it works for everybody.
Yeah.
But I love that, the hand massages. And I think that is really important. It's like in Japan, they do hugging places where you can go in and get a hug, which is really nice.
I love
Japan
that.
it's got some really, really good ideas, actually. There's some really nice ideas there. Weird ones as well. But hold that thought. We'll be back with Professor Sharron after this.
Navigating today's workplace is tough.
Toxic employees, endless drama, a lack of motivation. We've all been there.
But fear not, we are here to help. My name is Leanne and I'm a chartered psychologist.
My name is Al and I'm a business owner, and together we dig into the scientific and commercial secrets behind great workplace cultures in Truth, Lies and Work.
A no-nonsense, award-winning psychology podcast brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network. We explore practical strategies for building a great workplace.
We debunk buzzwords and bring you the very best advice around finding and keeping great people. From personality tests.
Personality tests they're mostly bollocks. I don't know what kind of language you do on your podcast. I don't know if people know this. But the man who wrote the Wonder Woman comics is the person who invented the disc.
When more flexible working became a norm, you no longer hurt your career prospects by being the one person who worked flexibly.
All the way to avoiding high turnover.
We recruit and promote people to managerial roles based on their technical skills, not their people skills. This is a very fundamental problem we have, which we haven't directly tackled.
From toxic-free cultures,
Interventions for the individual are only half the answer. Systemic change is the other half.
to sustainable growth.
Thinking beyond just paying somebody a good salary, I think is super necessary now. We have to offer so much more than that.
We have got you covered.
So join us on Tuesdays and Thursdays where we help you to simplify the science of work and build amazing workplace cultures.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters Office Hours, where we're talking to Professor Sharron Hinchliff about the sexual charter, the sexual rights charter for older adults and sexual well-being through the lifespan. So GPs are beginning to talk about the menopause and potentially link symptoms that we have to the menopause and offer solutions based around this. So what could we do to make them more able to ask about our sexual well-being in general, not just the menopause?
That's a great question. Yeah. So I think I've mentioned already that the work that we do that's part of the Sexual Rights Chart is about working with health professionals, including GPs and primary care nurses, about helping them to build their awareness and knowledge about this topic and just to sort of feel a bit more comfortable and confident sort of raising the subject. And that is really, really important because in the research that we've done and research that's been found by others as well, is that there's a bit of a catch-22 situation when we're talking about primary care, in that it's one of the first port of calls that older adults go when they've got a sexual question or a sexual issue they want to discuss, but they want the GP to ask them, whereas whereas the GP is wanting the patient to raise it themselves. So we're kind of stuck in this, who's going to move first. And that's why we feel like it's really important to sort of tackle this from multiple angles and sort of working with health professionals, working with members of the public as well, so that at least that conversation might happen. Because it is, like you say, you've mentioned menopause there, and I know that there's a lot of women that have questions about menopause generally, and I think the situation is getting better in terms of recognising menopausal symptoms and how we can help individuals sort of get through those really difficult and distressing times. But I think we're getting better recognising sexual well-being at menopause as well. There's a lot more information about what we can do. There's a lot more insight into that. There's a lot of things that are being developed and sold that are probably not useful. So we have to wade through all that information. But I think, the point I'm trying to get to is that I think sexual well-being is becoming more of an easy topic to talk about, and the barriers and the sort of obstacles that we were finding 20 odd years ago, they are slowly being eliminated.
Okay, well, going in the right direction then.
That's good.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
And but the pincer movement is absolutely right. It's almost like if you know you're going to the doctor to talk about a sexual question, ask it, or even just have it written down and then just give it to them or something. I think we can empower ourselves to do that as much as GPs do need to ask the questions.
Yeah.
Really good work.
I think so. And I think one of the things for, if anyone's listening and they're thinking, well, I can't even talk about that, well, just take something with you. Take like a prompt, or something from a magazine or something that you've seen on social media, and use that as a conversation starter. Or like Audrey says, you can write it down and pass it to your GP or your nurse, and because they're health professionals and they want to help,
and
they might not know that you've got a question about it.
That's it. It's about helping with the right thing.
Well, that's it. I mean, I go to the doctor about whatever, something innocuous, but it goes out of my head as soon as I walk in, so it's always a good idea to have a list of questions, I think.
Agreed.
Yeah. So it seems like more people are having sex older because there's more STIs.
Yes.
So they're not necessarily having safe sex, but it is happening. But where's the trend coming from to not potentially be having safe sex, and how can we ensure good sexual health in older adults?
So that is a trend that's been happening for quite some years.
So not a good one.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, that when we look at the prevalence of new diagnoses in younger people, it's a lot higher than in older adults, but that's not to say that the increases aren't happening in older age groups. And it's been going on for, many, many years. We've been seeing increases. It's not coming down, it is going up. And mainly, I think, in the sort of age group 45 to 64, and we're seeing many increases in there in most sexually transmitted infections, but also in the age group 65 plus as well. And the research that I've been involved with, and that I know that other people have done, has shown that one of the issues around that is that while people might know about STIs, they know what they are, they know what causes them, they don't necessarily see themselves as being at risk, because they think, well, if I've just got one sexual partner, then that's fine. However, they might not know that sexual partner's history, their sexual history. They might not know whether or not that sexual partner has got sexual relationships with someone else. And it is really about sort of whether or not we feel like we're in that risk category. And I think we have some kind of misinformation that's come through. And I feel like I can say this as a woman in her 50s, because I've grown up during the 80s and things like that. There's been messages from public health campaigns and sexual health campaigns that have really kind of shaped how we view sexual risk. And, the assumption that if we engage in this behaviour or certain behaviours like sleeping with sex workers, or if we're young people, then we're more at risk, and we're not likely to see ourselves as being in that kind of category. So I think, we've got a prime time to try and break down some of those misunderstandings or misinformation, I think, so that people know what's happening.
You're right. As you're talking, the messaging was very, very clear that it's very specifically this, or at least that's the implication.
Yeah.
Which, of course, we know is not true.
No.
And in a way, younger people, I suppose, can discuss that a lot more. But you're absolutely right. I can see why the messaging, and it's a great opportunity to change the messaging and to say that everybody is at risk, and maybe we don't need to make it sound so scary either.
I think that's it. Yes, yeah, and there have been some campaigns that have tried to do that, that have been aimed at older adults, and they're really, really good. But there's very few of them around, and a lot of people that I talk to haven't even heard of them. So I think we could do better in terms of sharing that message.
And sort of another area that we can do better at, and you briefly mentioned this earlier, with lots of misinformation and things which simply don't work out there. I mean, what can we do about things like vaginal dryness, painful sex? Because Halle Berry apparently is endorsing some kind of implement that with light on the end of it that seems to work for her.
Oh, okay, amazing.
What can we do? Can we do?
I'm intrigued by the Halle Berry story.
It's all over Facebook. It's all over Facebook. And I don't even know whether it really is her. It's not like they've done a deep fake of her saying anything. Yeah. But other people are saying, Halle Berry has said this has changed her life.
Oh, wow. Okay. So we're talking about the realm of sort of vaginal dryness and
this is a light thing that you insert, and then apparently whilst watching the Facebook advert you can read and you can sew and you can do whatever you want whilst you've got it inserted.
Oh, wow.
And it cures everything. It heals, your vagina heals itself.
What a great advertising campaign.
I know. So this is probably a good time to talk about this, because I can guarantee there's a lot of people on Facebook who will be buying that. Yeah. It's not cheap either. So are there things that we can do? Or GPs think of us?
I guess it depends what we're talking about. So if we're talking about any kind of vaginal pain, I think it's really important to get that checked out. So nip down to your GP, or if you've got an obstetrician or gynecologist, please do seek that professional help, because any pain that you're having sort of that's vaginally or genital or that area really does need checking out. In terms of vaginal dryness, which a high number of women that are going through the menopause transition do experience, in that thinning of the tissues. Well, one of the things that I know has been helpful for a lot of women is the vaginal estrogen, and that's the one that you insert a couple of times a week to start with, then it's once a week. But it's a really, really low dose of estrogen, so it's safe for women that are at risk of cancer, and it has been found to help with urinary tract infections, which a lot of women can get when they're going through menopause transition, as well as kind of just that feeling of having that lack of elasticity, I guess, in the tissues that are in that sort of vulval and vaginal area. So that's one thing. Now, if women don't want to use the vaginal estrogen, or if they find out that they can't, again, it's something you'd speak to your GP about. Then there's other things that they can use, like water-based lubricants that are really, really useful. You have to avoid the oil-based ones because they can irritate. And similarly, any that have got like a scent or a fragrance with them, then they can irritate sensitive areas. So, keep away from the body lotions and things like that, and just use the specially designed lubricants.
And this is the information that really needs to be going viral.
It's just the practical information that the woman on the street needs to know.
Yes, and it's researched, it's GP supported, it is not endorsed by celebrities. Yeah. This is another sort of a slightly cheeky question, but because I want to know, are there changes men go through? Which go beyond Viagra. So what can we expect for men as they get older, or is it just us that are kind of dealing with it?
No. I mean, there's so many other things that men can experience as they get older. I mean, we're not, when you think about it, we're not really that different, but all the attention seems to be focused on the erection because we've got the drugs like Viagra that can actually help with that. And so I think the erection problems, there's about 40% of men as they get older in their 50s and above that start to experience erectile problems. But there's also issues around sexual desire and losing sexual desire. There's also problems that men can experience with their orgasm, so not be able to orgasm. They might orgasm too quick, or they might have something called a dry orgasm, where well, it's exactly what it says. You have an orgasm, but it doesn't produce anything. But I think these issues, you're right, Audrey, we tend to think of these things as sort of women's problems. If we think about sexual desire loss, we think about women. If we think about orgasm problems, we think about women. And we forget that these issues can affect men as well. So I think, it's a really important topic to address men beyond that erection kind of sphere and think about those issues, but also our self-esteem as well, because that's one of the biggest things that can influence our sexual desire is our own self-esteem. And we have something that's called a sexual self-esteem that quite simply is what we think about our own self, how we think about ourselves, how we think about what we value and how we perceive ourselves. Then that can have an influence on whether or not we feel like we should be engaging in a sexual relationship with someone, or how we feel like about getting naked with someone. And, there's a massive psychology to our sexual expression and enjoyment.
You see, that's huge, because if, say, you with a partner and maybe they are experiencing a lack of sexual desire, then you've got the situation where no one wants to talk to each other. So now in the other partner's head, they're thinking, I'm not attractive anymore. It's ongoing if we don't talk about these things. So, I'm really glad we're having this conversation. Professor Sharron, we're keeping you. We'll be back just after this.
Our passion for coffee goes way beyond the cup. We believe in a fair production chain in which each coffee farmer plays an essential role. We are proud to support our communities and promote environmental sustainability. Bedford Coffee Roasters guarantees an exceptional experience for producers and consumers. Join us on our journey to extraordinary coffee, where quality, sustainability and fairness come together to create an experience unlike any other. Ground with passion, served with pride. Bedford Coffee Roasters, coffee worth drinking.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters Office Hours. We're here with Professor Sharron Hinchliff, and we're talking about the Sexual Rights Charter for Older Adults. We're talking about sexual expression and sexual intimacy across the lifespan. And just in the last segment, so if you've just tuned in, do go back and watch, Professor Sharron raised a really important point about how men's sexual problems as they get older go beyond erectile dysfunction, which is the one we always talk about, we see the adverts for. But there's so much psychology involved in this that if we don't talk about what's going on and we don't talk about this with our partners, we end up having all kinds of other issues build up because we make up a narrative in our heads. And relating to that, and I would love to talk to you more on that, but relating to that, there's also stories about the impact of dementia on sexual health, because you've got people who are in the LGBTQ plus community who have a same-sex partner, but because of the dementia, it might take them back to a place where it was taboo, and then the caregivers come into the home and they hide the pictures because they don't want to show that they have a same-sex partner and things like that. So what other issues do illnesses cast on sexual well-being as we get older?
I think when we're talking about dementia, it is a really, really complex area in terms of relationships and intimacy and sex. And the sort of issue around hiding photographs of a same-sex partner is definitely something I've come across. But it's not specific, to dementia. It can be across the board. And that is sort of driven by a fear of being treated differently because you're in a same-sex relationship, and there have been evidence of people being treated differently because of that, and horror stories that we see on the news that are going through the regulatory bodies because people in care homes have been bullied just for being gay.
Still?
And there was an awful case a couple of years ago where a chap died because he'd been burnt by cigarettes and stuff like that, and just because and it was, the sort of jury concluded that it was bullying based on his sexual identity.
Oh my God! Sorry, I'm just so shocked. This is recent.
2 or 3 years ago, I think. Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah.
So I'm sharing that story to provide context as to why people might be a little bit embarrassed about letting staff know about their lifestyle and their history, because they might fear that being treated differently. And of course, it's not just the staff. When you go into moving a care home, you're living with other people as well, and you've got no idea what their attitudes are like and what their views are like. So I think that's something in terms of that hiding those photos. But you asked about other issues that can affect our sexual health and well-being as we get older. You know, there's so many in terms of illnesses, the illness itself, and also any medications that we might be taking. And one of the issues that I'm really interested in at the moment is that long-term conditions tended to be diagnosed in our 50s and older. They're now getting diagnosed at a younger age group, and long-term conditions like diabetes they can have an impact on our sexual function, and the medications that we take, maybe for high blood pressure or anything like that, can have an impact on sexual function as well. So there's many different ways in which health conditions and illnesses can have an impact on our sexual well-being. And when we think about that and how embarrassing it is to ask for help, or to actually make that connection that this sexual problem is related to my tablets, that's why one of the reasons why we need to talk about it, because if this sexual problem starts happening within 3 months of you being prescribed a new medicine, then go back to your GP and say, is this a side effect? Because there's a good chance it is. And, your GP might be able to sort of tweak your dosage to make that work for you. But I don't think people know about this.
This is why this conversation really is really important. And it isn't, again, a lot of your work is every single kind of holistically, every single person involved holistically. We're talking about the professionals, we're talking about us ourselves, we're talking about caregivers. It's about raising awareness for everyone. And you make such a good point about the need for professionals to have a sensitivity about what people might be going through or where their thinking is. How, I guess, yes, we're raising awareness, but in what ways maybe could caregivers become a little bit more sensitive to sexual issues that the people they're caring for might have, or to even raise these conversations? Is it your diabetic medicine that's causing the problem? Is it just knowledge?
Yeah, I guess that's part of it. Yeah, having sort of knowledge about the medicines that can have this sexual side effects, because when you think about it, if you're practicing as a nurse or a GP or another health professional, how many medicines is there? You can't, there's absolutely hundreds and thousands of medicines. You can't know the side effects for all of them. So when I deliver my training, I've got like a sheet with medicines on it and their potential sexual side effects. And some of the really, really common medicines like antidepressants have some of the most serious impacts on our sexual function. And we have young people that are taking, antidepressants as well and experiencing these problems. And sometimes it can take a while to get that sexual function back after you've stopped taking them. So even on that scale, a lot of health professionals are not au fait with these side effects of the drug. So it's having that knowledge, it's having that awareness, but also having that confidence to ask the patient, if they're experiencing a problem. And just something like, oh, I know you've got this new condition. Have you noticed this? Or you can ask a question like, one of my patients the other week said that they'd started to experience desire loss. And is that something that you're going through? So as long as you're brave enough to have that conversation, and obviously the first time you do it might be really, really difficult because it's not an easy thing to talk about really, even for health professionals unless they've got the training. But the first time you do it, you're over that kind of barrier, aren't you? And then you can feel more comfortable asking those questions again.
Just as you were talking, it's almost there's an element of shame, I think, that comes out. And then this relates to the, I guess, LGBTQ community, if they feel that a sexual STI or something is their fault because of the messaging that had been round before. And then even now, when we're talking about asking the question, as a health professional, you might even feel ashamed that, oh, am I being titillating? Am I, and it's silly, but there's a real, sex and shame are very closely linked. That could be a whole show.
I think they are. And I think often health professionals and social care professionals may feel like they're crossing a boundary that they shouldn't really cross into, because we see sex as a very private part of life. But in terms of the shame, I mean, people were shamed, in many years ago. We're talking about the older generation now who grew up through significant social change, but part of that society was to kind of shame people for having same-sex relationships, and to the extent that they had to keep it hidden, and we've already talked about campaigns from the 1980s like the HIV one as well. It was very blaming, wasn't it? And people, sort of did incur feelings of stigma and shame. So I think perhaps for the younger generation of LGBT, I think that's going to be very different, because there's a lot of sort of awareness and there's a lot of openness about talking about your relationships and sexual safety and things, because there's been that drive towards that. But I think for our current older generation, I think it's still a taboo topic.
Yeah, it seems that way. So what are your top tips for sexual well-being as we get older?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I've got to say that the first one is about having a healthy lifestyle, and you might not think that this is sex related, but I think it is. We've already been talking about our health conditions, and medicines can have an impact on our sexual health and well-being. So I think just keeping healthy by eating well and by getting some exercise through walking and things like that, if you can, is my main top tip. But there's also the top tip, which we've already covered today, and that is around that communication. So if you're in a relationship and one of you is having a problem, no matter how difficult it is, it would be beneficial to have a conversation with your partner and try not to cast judgment or anything like that, because what we do know from the research is that in relationships where a sexual difficulty is talked about, then they fare better than the ones where it's not. And like I said before, if it's not talked about, people can feel unloved, they can feel rejected, there can be some resentfulness that's set in. So, I think that's a really important tip.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Very sensible advice. Thank you. And where can we learn more about you and the Charter?
Okay, so the Charter, we've got our own website, and that's agesexandrights.com. So please do hop over there and have a look at the resources we've got. But if you want to look at my work more generally, I've got my own personal website called SharronHinchliff.com. And there's lots of work on there. I like to work with artists who are kind of trying to challenge all those negative stereotypes about older women in particular being beautiful and being sexy. So I've got a lot of work on that over there.
Excellent, thank you.
Amazing, yeah, we absolutely love, and the artwork's great as well that you've got there. We are going to keep Professor Sharron, because she will be doing our Business Boost.
So if anyone's interested in finding out more about the Sexual Rights Charter and how they can use that to support the work that they do, please just go over to agesexandrights.com and have a look at what the information that's there. We've got some examples of the work that we've already done. We've got some examples of what the Charter actually looks like. And there's a Contact Me form as well. So if you fill in that Contact Me, I'll get in touch with you, and then we can share the Charter materials with you.
That's another mind-blowing conversation.
Yeah, and as always, we just want to carry on talking about it, but the show's not long enough.
Yeah, it was like having to move on to another question. And it was I was so interested in the answer before, because we really don't talk enough about men's sexual issues as they get older.
I agree, yeah.
And I think we should, because they have an impact, because if, exactly as she said, if the male has lost desire for whatever reason, medication, whatever that might be, and then you're thinking, oh, this must be me, that can lead to all kinds of other problems which are not related at all.
That's right, because if you don't talk about it, it all starts with communication. And if you don't talk about it, you don't know what's in your partner's mind. They don't know what's in your mind, and you can't resolve it.
And I think the thing is, when we're talking about communicating with your partner, it's not necessarily we need to talk. It's not one of those, and neither is it in the act of, as one of our other therapists, Medina, will say, there's a whole sexual act that takes place. It's not just the sex itself. So we're not talking about having those conversations at any of those points. No. It's just about having the conversation maybe when you're in the car, or just as a casual kind of thing.
Yeah, doing the washing up, whatever.
Yeah, to raise it there. It's not, don't make it a big deal. I think we make a lot of things a big deal, don't we?
Yes, right. And then it becomes a huge issue, and it might be just a very small issue or something that could be easily dealt with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's because it's so taboo, and because, as you said, some people do experience a lot of shame around the subject anyway, just maybe because of how they've been brought up or whatever it might be. That adds whole other layers to the problem, which, as Sharron said, is a very private matter. So there's all these extra kind of nuances around the subject which make it so hard to talk about. And if we just kind of cut through all of that and just talked about it, calmly and nicely.
And the funny thing is, and I like this opportunity to reflect on things, I like to think I have quite good communication with my husband, but I was just going through a speech for the Age of Love Cafe, because I'm doing the opening speech, and he suddenly said to me, "Oh, you've mentioned the pill. Are your stomach problems related to the pill?" I was like, "Oh, I didn't think that." Now, I've been on this pill for the last month, and I have noticed changes, but that's not the thing I bring up in conversation, but I have it in the speech. I have it in a speech.
How interesting.
Let that sink in.
Yes.
Not conversation. I have it in a speech. And then from there, I'm Dr. Google. Actually, Harvard has done a study. And yes, the pill I'm on is related to stomach problems. So,
wow.
But it was only because I read him my speech.
Yeah. And so you hadn't had a conversation with your husband about it, but he heard it. Wow.
Have conversations.
Yeah.
And on that, have a healthy week.